Listeners, I'm so happy to have with me a great and long-term friend, For Price. For and I go back years and years and years. We were law partners together. He was my managing law partner of what I think may have been the best law firm in Amarillo years ago. But let me tell you a little bit about For, and this is going to take a minute, guys, because For has accomplished so much. He's a graduate of the University of Texas. He's a graduate of St. Mary University's Law School. He was an attorney. He was managing partner of a law firm in Amarillo. He is currently vice president and trust officer at Amarillo National Bank. He's been the state representative for House District 87 since 2010. You're in your fifth term, For. That's amazing. During that time, he served as chairman of House Committee on Public Affairs, chairman of the House Select Committee on Opioids and Substance Abuse, chairman of the House Select Committee on Mental Health, and he currently serves as the chairman of the House Calendars Committee and co-chairman of the Health and Human Services Transition Legislative Oversight Committee. Did I get all that correct, For?
That's pretty accurate. It's a mouthful.
Okay. And perhaps more importantly about For is he's married to his beautiful wife, Karen, who, as I said, although For is a Texas Longhorn, his beautiful wife, who I've known for a long time as well, was homecoming queen at Texas Tech University. So For, you were happy to marry way above yourself. I enjoyed reading about you as I prepared for this, For, and frankly, one thing I thought I'd do is talk about the recognitions that you've had. But then as I studied that, I figured out that would take our entire time. There are 11 pages of recognitions that For has got through his years of service as a state rep and from all kinds of organizations. So let me just cover the topics. He's been recognized for his work on behalf of children and senior adults. He's been recognized for his work on economic development and jobs, education, health care, justice reform, mental health and substance abuse. Texas Monthly Magazine named For as one of the Texas best legislators in 2007. And you've also been recognized for your work on behalf of public safety. My goodness, For, I think we'll just shut off, stop the interview now because it can't get any better than this. Thank you for your service of Texas. And thank you for being on this program today and joining here to talk to our listeners.
Well, I'm really glad to join you, Johnny. Thanks for the invitation. It's really great to see you, even if it's virtually in this environment. I really appreciate the opportunity to visit this morning.
Well, thank you, For. First, I'm going to be a little selfish. I'm going to talk about what I call shifting the law practice. But then I'm going to end with what we're going to do in the next legislative session. So it'll be boring perhaps at first, but maybe it'll get exciting towards the second. I've been considering shifting how I practice law, changing the paradigm, working in fractional general counsel. I'm doing that for a lot of my existing clients that I've been representing since I was your partner. But I want to give you an opportunity just to talk about, as a lawyer, what advice would you give other legal professionals that will improve how we provide service to clients?
Well, I know this will sound very simple, but it sometimes is hard to remember and do in this hectic world that we're living in and practicing law in, which is to really get to know the client, spend the time that's necessary to understand how their business operates, what makes them tick. There is nothing, I've seen it in law as well as banking, in politics. One thing that's common across all spectrums is people like to tell you about their business. They're proud of it, and they should be. They've invested, time and money, and quite frankly, their resources and their life into growing what has become their profit center, their business, the way they make money. And so for a professional to spend the time to get genuinely interested and know it's going to allow them to be a better counselor, a better advisor, somebody that will know the the consequences of certain decisions in a more comprehensive way. And I know that sounds, kind of cliche or trite, I'm sure, to some degree. However, when you're worried about your billable hours, when you're worried about the time that you could be spending doing something else, when you've got a million and one different folks tugging at you for different things, it is hard to carve out the time to really get to know some client's business in a more intimate way, in a more comprehensive way. So that's one piece of advice that I think, if you can remember that up front, clients will remember that, and certainly it will make a difference down the road when decisions are being made. So instead of just, addressing the question of the day, whatever it happens to be, really spend a little time on the front end, non-billable time that you can spend where you're not charging somebody for that, but show them that you care, because I know that most lawyers do, and to
Right.
really grow that relationship down the road, I think it'll be appreciated by all parties.
I love that answer. That it kind of talks about how the history of the practice of law started long ago. Let me ask you this: as how has your experience as an attorney? You were an attorney for several years. How has that helped you as a state representative?
Well, it's funny when I first got into the state house, of course, in the race that I was running, there were a lot of folks that said, "Oh, we don't need another lawyer, running
Yeah, that's
to
right. I remember
become,
that.
a house member." And the reality is there aren't that many. And so the critical thinking capabilities, the legal education, just the training that you receive is valuable because you're there. That's where in the legislature that law and policy come together. And so, words have meaning. And so to be able to draft something and to see the consequences of what those words are going to have, in the future is a skill and it's
Yeah.
good. And so I really think that training background, just having some real world experience representing clients who've had to deal with the laws that are currently in place and the regulations that result from those statutes really make me a better legislator. And it is, I think it's an easy thing to make fun of sometimes, but in reality, I can't tell how many colleagues will often say, "Hey, can you help me word this?" Or on the floor when you're drafting an
Right.
amendment, and it's got to be done quickly. Those skills are appreciated, and I think they're very valuable. So I've appreciated having that background in education very much in this world.
I love that answer. It reminds me of you and I both knew an attorney who's now deceased, was a mentor of mine, Jimmy Ross from Dimmitt, and Jimmy would say
Sure.
that the science of attorneys is language in terms, and terms are important. So I love that answer. I love that answer. Uh, you talked about the having an ongoing relationship, or actually what you said is if you'll get to know your clients, attorney, one piece of advice: get to know your clients before you start billing. Get to know who they are, study who they are. What what do you is there an advantage of having an ongoing relationship with an attorney for a business? And if so, what are those advantages?
I see some advantages in it for both parties, frankly. I mean, a business who has a relationship with their lawyer, their attorney, on a regular basis means they might be involving them in very small decisions. They might be involving them obviously in more consequential decisions. But the bottom line is they've got this relationship where the lawyer who is engaged is going to see all aspects of that industry, that business, and the day to day operations of it that they might not otherwise see if they're only being called occasionally when the fire alarm's being pulled or when there is
Right.
a contract, negotiation to be dealt with or there's an emergency question. You have a much better comprehensive understanding. And frankly, from the business's standpoint, I don't think, they should have to reteach some counselor their business every time a question arises. And if they only need them for emergencies, on occasion or when something comes up, that person, he or she may not, necessarily be able to reboot all the information that they were told 8 months earlier. But if they'd been
Right.
kind of kept in contact over time, that really makes their representation probably not only better but more efficient. And if that person's not available, well, then yes, they would have to go hire somebody and actually give them much more background and information and spend a lot more time teaching them about why something is important or why they need to achieve some goal. So I just see it as a win-win for both parties, quite frankly. I mean, it's better for the counselor and it's better for the business. I see major advantages really from both sides.
I love that answer. Through the years, I've begun to think that the compensation system attorneys often use, mostly in business transactions. I'm not talking about the contingent fee case. I'm talking about the hourly billing system. I think it can at times discourage businesses from calling attorneys, and so I have wondered if a monthly fee would be a better way, and perhaps give attorneys more flexibility on time they want to spend. I'm thinking about your service as a legislator. I know you get to the House the 5 a.m. and stay till midnight, and it's because you want to invest the time. And same thing, I think, kind of applies to attorneys. Have you known instances where a business perhaps may have been discouraged to call and involve their attorney because of the hourly billing system?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's common, and honestly, it is probably a very big factor in a business's decision on whether or not to engage somebody, even for rather routine things that can be very important in their operations. I mean, obviously, that is critical to their success is to have good legal counsel, but you don't want to have a situation where the lawyer is hesitant to spend too much time on something or not enough time on something because of the financial consequences. If that had all been negotiated on the front end and maybe they had this ongoing relationship where, some months they may not, spend very much time, for a business because their needs aren't that great. Some months they may spend way more time than what their negotiated fee may be. But if they know there's that consistency, throughout the year, the business is going to be more willing to pick up the phone and call them.
Right.
Even if it's not an emergency, and frankly, that's kind of the goal. You want them to feel comfortable calling them up so that the lawyer has a better relationship and understanding of their day-to-day operations. But then the lawyer is going to feel more comfortable spending the time, when it's necessary, knowing that, they're not going to be upset at the fees or, if they don't call and they're not spending any time that month, mostly, it's not going to be a problem for either party. So, I mean, I just see, what you're saying is I think something a lot of lawyers think about, because I know when I was in private practice, being sensitive to the rates and the time is something you think about every single day with your clients. It's the least favorite part of the practice of law for me personally, which was,
Right.
being cognizant of how many minutes per day I'm spending on a client's case and
Right.
or file. So I really do think that yeah, it's beneficial for both parties, and I'm confident that businesses are very reluctant without it to pick up the phone and call a lawyer unless it's absolutely positively necessary.
Well, I thank you for that answer. I want to take advantage of this time to perhaps get a little general advice for my son, John David, who is in his last year of law school at Baylor. Just generally, how do you think attorneys can better serve clients?
Well, first of all, to John David, tell him good luck. I know he's over the hump here, entering his last home stretch of law school, and we were fortunate enough in our capital office to have your son John David work for us, and so he was just a fantastic assistance,
Right.
to our
Thank you.
office, and please give him my best. But just in general terms, again, I think it's important to be creative. I mean, it's not all contracts and liabilities. I mean, that's obviously very important, but be creative. I think there's lots of options for lawyers out there to use the skills that they're gaining in law school. I have had the great privilege, really, of working, in litigation and in transactional world with probate and estate law, which I practiced for a number of years, having real estate clients and business clients, and then moving into a legislative realm where obviously that doesn't have anything to do with, paying me for my legal work, but it does, as I mentioned earlier in this conversation, come in handy when it comes to drafting bills and legislation and learning about, what effects and consequences those words and those statutes may actually have. And then certainly working, in a setting at a financial institution, with documents that I've either drafted or have, much exposure to, is really great. And that's just a slice of the pie right there. I mean, there's lots of different angles that lawyers can take. So, I think having that education is useful no matter what path somebody takes, whether it's traditional or non-traditional. I think spending time with your clients, whether it's an individual or a business, getting to know them, understanding really what the motivations are for whatever you're being asked to achieve, is very important. And kind of look at these things as a long-term relationship, because if you take care of somebody, I just am a firm believer, and you've seen it too. You take care of somebody, the traditional word of mouth referral, reputational build that just starts to accumulate over time is so important. And I'm not going to say it's rare today, because it's not necessarily rare, but in this transient world where people are moving all the time, and they're migrating from businesses more commonly than maybe was the case 30 or 40 years ago. When you find that one relationship, that attorney that you can trust and rely on, maybe it doesn't matter as much anymore if they're around the corner or even in the same city. You can trust them for good, sound judgment and advice. That's important. And I just can't, really emphasize that enough. I think if graduates and new practitioners will take the time to really invest in their clients the way their clients are investing in them, it'll pay really good long-term dividends.
Well, and you talked about being creative, and I don't want to get into specifics, but I remember a decade or so ago, you walked into my office when you were still practicing, we were still partners, and you said, I need a creative lawyer. And you told me a story if about a client of yours, that if I were to tell our listeners the story, they would recognize it. and you asked me to work on it. And I can remember I asked one of our associates to help me with it. And she came back and said, Johnny, we can't help them. There's nothing we can do. And I said, we can't go tell this family that story. So we were able to, I appreciate having the opportunity to work on that. I don't know how you thought I was a creative attorney, but I thank you for that. Let's switch gears and let's talk a little bit more about you. By the way, I read in the Austin paper yesterday that Amarillo, the Metropolitan Statistical area, the Amarillo Metropolitan Statistical area has the lowest unemployment rate in the state of Texas. Well done to those of you guys that are working on that. I appreciate that. We've talked about you being a state rep, and tell me what motivated you to become a state rep, and what keeps you excited about doing that?
The ability and opportunity to assist people broadly really, motivated me to run, and just the opportunity to help people, navigate what is a complicated and often intimidating bureaucratic world when it comes to services and state agencies and all that. Really was something that it motivated me to run in the beginning, but the more I got into it and the more I worked on it, the more important I see our state government being to our daily existence. I mean, everything you deal with, and really, I mean, from the time you get up to the roads you're driving on, your schools, your education, your healthcare system, the natural resources and economic development. Gosh, it's such an exciting, dynamic array of issues to work on and help people. It not only motivated me in the beginning, but it makes me want to get up and go to work and continue to do that every single day. And I think there's just such great opportunity. And I love the area that I live in and the people I work for. As you're well aware, it's a great, very unique part of our state. And we are 500 plus miles away from the state capitol. And so having an advocate that is, from the area, works in the area, believes in the area, sees the opportunity, the workforce. You just mentioned the low unemployment. All the things that make it great sometimes aren't as well known, when you're that far away. And so, just benefiting the region, benefiting the people, it all motivates me to work hard at that job. And I'm just privileged to have it. I appreciate the confidence the people in the district have placed in me to represent them.
Well, they're so lucky. I was selfish, and when you first told me you were going to run, I was, oh heck, but I'm so happy for the state of Texas and for the district to have you. So let's talk about the session. I don't know how you're going to answer this, but what do you want? What do you think is important to be accomplished in this upcoming session?
This next session is going to be, an interesting one from lots of standpoints. Obviously, we're going to have an environment to work within, which is going to be different from any session we've seen in the past due to COVID-19, and so just the process and the committee work and voting on the floor and some of the procedures and getting stakeholders into rooms at the Capitol to publicly address some of the issues that I know will be important to the state is going to have a different feel to it. So we're going to have to navigate through that and manage that safely, which will probably slow things down a little bit from some, viewpoints. I do think what most people forget is that the only bill that has to pass is our state's budget. So that will be front and center for everything that we deal with. All policy and programmatic decisions really stem from how well financially the state's doing. It gives us a lot more leeway in good times than it does in bad times. And right now we're suffering a little bit from a retracted economy, and our sales tax collections obviously have been reduced due to a slower economic condition due to COVID-19, and so has the commodity prices. Oil and natural gas prices were a little lower than we expected them to be throughout this year, and that's had an impact too on severance tax collections. So bottom line is, the comptroller said expect there to be less money to work with, and so that will be a big challenge. So we have to balance that budget and we have to pass that. So that'll be priority number one. It's a redistricting year, which happens only once every 10 years. And so new maps, new lines for State Board of Education, judicial districts, as well as congressional districts, state house and state senate districts will all be addressed. And that may not happen on time. That may happen in a special session due to census, collection being delayed a little bit. And so we're not sure about that 100%, but that'll be a big topic in the 87th session or in a special session following the regular session. And of course, our state is the envy of all 49 other states. We continue to grow at a very, very quick pace. It's 30 million roughly today in population for the state, and that number will continue to rise. We're averaging just under 1,000 people a day to the state of Texas. About half of those are naturally born babies, and the other half are coming from other countries and other states throughout the nation. And so our infrastructure, you cannot, ignore the needs in healthcare, access to better healthcare in rural parts of the state, especially. You can't ignore the needs for criminal justice, demands that exist due to a growing population, transportation needs, education needs, both public and higher are at the top of that list, and the demand on our water resources and other natural resources. It's all very important for economic development as well. So there's no shortage of issues. That's the way I kind of look at it. I've got my priorities legislatively and the things that I've worked on since I've been there, which not only I think help our area, but help the entire state. A lot of it is focused on healthcare, behavioral health, as well as physical health, education, natural resources, water use. And again, our budget's going to be front and center with all of that. So it's going to be a very, very busy session. I have no doubt that it'll be interesting. There'll be a lot of fireworks, of course, as there usually are. Elections are right around the corner as well, and that'll have an impact on it probably. So I think January will come quickly, and we'll be off and running.
Well, because I've known you for so long and know your integrity, know your character, have had the opportunity to see you, kind of grow up with you, grow older with you. I just am so thankful for you doing what you do. And yet I've got to ask you a question, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot. We're going to have a new speaker. In the last legislative session, your name was mentioned often as a prospective speaker of the House. Can you give our listeners any insight into whether that is a possibility and where that process is?
Well, because the current speaker did not choose to run again for re-election, that opens that up, and that's an election that happens on the first day of the regular session, and it's voted on by the other House members. So, you kind of know the universe of voters. It's 150 members, and it happens right off the bat. And we had a new speaker last session, and so we're going to have another new speaker this session. The House will elect a new one, and that's pretty rare historically to have back-to-back sessions where you have a speaker's race each time. Right now, nobody has filed, the paperwork necessary to indicate their desire to run for that spot, me included. I've made no decisions with regard to whether or not I'll file the paperwork to do that in the 87th. The reality is, I think everybody statewide is very focused on these general elections in November and what that will do to the makeup of the body. Right now the margin is pretty close. It's
Right.
83-67, and certainly that means there's only a 9-seat margin to have a majority, which obviously is very important in the speaker's world. It's very important for the ultimate determination of committee chairs and just the makeup and composition of committees, of all stripes and shapes and sizes and varieties. And so it's very important, to take care of business on the elections before, those decisions, I think, are made. And I think that's kind of the stance everybody's in. Everybody recognizes we're going to have a new leader of the chamber, and that will shake up, the committee structures and certainly the conduct of business throughout the session. But, I think that'll start to sort itself out probably in more crystal terms after November 3rd.
Well, just on a personal note, please file, and I can't think of a better person to be Speaker of our House. Shifting back as we finish up, this podcast is called Shifting the Law. What is one piece of advice you want our current and aspiring law professional audience to take away from this time we spent together?
That's a big question. I mean, the law is so dynamic, and it is such a great field to work within, because there's so many different avenues, a practitioner can take to develop their practice and their career. Again, I think, there's really no need to get pigeonholed. So I guess one piece of advice I'd say is, don't feel constrained to be, stuck in, one rut or another, because, you and I have talked about, at least just generally, the many different ways we have both individually used our law degrees and licenses to practice law or use it in various, ways. I think, it's easy in this world today to get discouraged about, not just, the love of the law, obviously is why people may go to law school to begin with. But then once they graduate and find out what the actual business or practice of law looks like, there's some mundane administrative headaches and things that really aren't ever addressed in law school per se. So I would say, it's easy to get a little discouraged on the front end if you're not aware of that. But on the other hand, there's tons of variety. We've talked about being creative today. I think one of the topics you discussed, and shifting the practice, is a good creative way to put, both sides of the equation at ease. There's lots of different ways for people to use their degrees in education. So I guess one thing I would say is just avoid being, maybe pigeonholed into one thing, and try something if you like it. And, there's nothing that says you can't be an insurance defense lawyer for a while and then switch your practice over using the background, trial experience, et cetera, that you may have received, and going a different direction, going in-house,
Right.
for instance, or doing
Right.
something else. So, I mean, it's really, it's one of those things that I think, it's easy to, like any other field or business, you can get kind of tunnel vision, I guess, or pigeonhole, but I'd say try to keep your options open, because there's so much variety out there. It's a great background to have.
Well, thank you for that. I love that answer. That's very good. Thank you so much for your time with me. I know how busy you are with a session upcoming for your work for your bank, and so I'm so thankful for this time that you've given to me.
You bet, Johnny. Great to join you today. Have a good afternoon.